yesterday on Gallant and George, no Joe, just Paul, I at some point drifted off into wondering aloud about DeMeco Ryans and specifically asking a question. Is he ever going to be one of the best coaches in the NFL, given that there are some recurring struggles of late? In case you missed it, here is that clip because people are not happy about this.
I don't think any of us thought that 10 games into this year, with the Texans having the exact same record as they did last year, that we would already be starting to wonder about the ceiling of DeMeco Ryans as a head coach. But how can you not? You have to a little bit. It's not to say that you think he sucks right now or anything like that. It's more to say, how good will he be as a head coach? Are we going to look at DeMeco Ryans and ever put him in the same conversation as Sean McVay or different style Dan Campbell, which we're all doing all of a sudden, Jim Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin? Because that's what you want. Having a coach like that, plus a quarterback like that, means you should get a chance at multiple Super Bowls. Andy Reid, can't believe I didn't say his name off the top of my head. There's a lot of coaches that we hope he will be in the same category as someday. And the gaslighty stuff does make you wonder, because if the same things are happening every single week, it makes you wonder about his approach behind the scenes.
Okay, so people are mad about that?
People are mad about that.
Why? I don't understand. What is there to be mad about?
Because I'm questioning DeMeco Ryans. Some are saying I'm calling DeMeco Ryans mid. Some are saying that I want the Houston Texans to fire DeMeco Ryans based off of that. I'm pretty sure most people didn't watch the video, to be fair. And I also realized that there's always a bit of sensitivity when we were talking about a young head coach, specifically a young black head coach, much like there's some sensitivity to criticizing a young quarterback. Some people are going to be like, oh, we're doing this again. And I want everyone to know I'm not doing that with DeMeco Ryans. I think it is fair to wonder how good he'll be as a head coach, because he is in the midst right now of some pretty trying times. And lots of great coaches go through stuff like this. I am wondering if we still think he's on the same trajectory that we thought after last year, where he did an incredible job with a team that had some talent. Obviously, the quarterback figured out how to make Nico Collins work. Offensive line, who was at the very least highly paid. Will Anderson, but not that much talent. A lot of people thought it was a disastrous situation that he was going into. But in year two, have the steps forward been taken? They have the same record right now as they did last year, and there was a ton of hype behind this team going into this year.
I would say, no, they haven't come anywhere close to where we thought they were going to go this year. And at some point, that has to fall on your head coach. I mean, you've got questions about DeMeco that I think that are really fair. With until this season, his record as a 49ers defensive coordinator and as a Texans head coach, every single time he faced Shane Steichen, what those offenses were doing to DeMeco's defense. They were having massive success, whether Steichen was with the Eagles or the Colts. I mean, even if you look back, and that's where I feel like some of the people who are upset about this, it's almost like revisionist history in a little bit of a way. Because even if you just go to this last offseason, it took me 5 seconds to find an article of Pro Football Network and their power rankings of NFL head coaches coming into the season. DeMeco Ryans is ranked 13th in the NFL going into the season. They don't have him in that category. We didn't jump DeMeco into the top of the echelons of coaches like we did with CJ Stroud, because one of those felt warranted, and I think one of them felt like it wasn't, because we just don't view coaches the same way as quarterbacks. You can't reach the top of the mountain unless you win a Super Bowl, until you at least get to an AFC Championship game. I mean, every guy that's going to be up there is either done that or they're very clearly an offensive genius. Guys like Matt not Matt Eberflus.
Guys like Matt Eberflus. Isolate that. Put that on the Bears podcast.
Matt LaFleur is the name I was looking for.
Great coach.
Kevin O'Connell. Like those coaches, we moved up quick because we're seeing elite level results from their offense and their offensive minds. Defensive coaches were always going to be a little bit more reserved, and putting them in that top category because everyone thinks that there's a ceiling for a defensive coach.
Well, that's fair. I think a lot of people get mad, at least online, when a offensive-minded coach isn't hired for a young team. I think people in New England are doing that right now with Gerard Mayo. They got Drake May. Maybe they're not getting the most out of Drake May to open things up. I think some of the pushback has to do with people who are like, oh my God, you're questioning a black coach after a year and a half. And again, sensitive to that. I understand why you might be feeling that way. But really, all I'm asking is just how good can he be? Because this is a really tough, difficult time for him right now. And I, as someone who does a sports talk show 3 hours a day, I never believe a conversation is too early to be had. I'm not saying anything about DeMeco Ryans or putting a ceiling over him. I'm merely wondering what it is. And if he can get into that same group as the guys at the top, he's got the quarterback. We're talking about a team that has the potential to win multiple Super Bowls. You know, potential. Again, will they live up to it? It's really hard to do that in this league. But the big problem I have right now with the Texans is there's a lot of recurring issues, and there are some tough decisions that need to be made potentially. And I am wondering about the real big one that has not been made yet. Are they going to move on from Bobby Slowick? And I would say right now, and we talked about this earlier in the week, I don't think it makes sense to move on from him right now. Talked about that with DJ yesterday too, Joe. I feel like right now, you kind of have what you have, and to, I guess, reenact Hernando Cortez when he came to, the Aztec Empire and wanted to take that thing down, burned all the boats. You're stuck here with this, and you got to figure out a way to make it work. And the CEO of this entire operation is DeMeco Ryans. So he's going to have to figure out a way to get more out of the offensive side of things. And I don't think that it's fair to focus on Bobby Slowick like some online. Bobby Slowick's Hitler. I mean, no one said that yet, but it's trending that way. I don't think it's necessarily fair to remove DeMeco entirely from criticism of the offense, because he is the one that is overseeing all this. And yesterday he had talked about how, or excuse me, not yesterday, on Tuesday, he had talked about how he's part of this process. Is he a major part of the process? I don't know, but he sees it. And if he thinks it needs to be better, which clearly does, even if the offensive line's limiting things, he's got to do something about it. So we're at the crossroads. Okay. And I'm just asking, where does DeMeco go from here in the midst of a very difficult time?
It's a really fair question that I think we get a much better picture of what the answer is when the season ends. That if Bobby Slowick does not get a head coaching job, what is the response from the Texans there? Because what's going to separate DeMeco from being a good or average coach to being a great head coach is his hiring ability. And he hired Bobby Slowick. Bobby Slowick came from San Francisco. So if he decides that the offense this year, struggles, and he views it as not a problem and not a Bobby Slowick problem, and it's a roster problem, and he sticks with Bobby Slowick, and then next year we're here having the same conversations, it really changes the way you have to evaluate DeMeco. Because when you look at the best coaches in the NFL, like, what do? Bill Belichick, Andy Reid, Sean McVay, they have trees. They have guys that come in and go out and have great success. Not Belichick. Like those, but those guys failed, and it's not his fault.
I mean, I'm part of the Belichick coaching tree. I'm arguably the greatest success that's come out of it. I'm a football mastermind. That's true too. See, How about that? Mike Vrabel, technically, I'm just kidding. Listen,
Bill O'Brien over Mike Vrabel.
Keep cooking. Keep cooking.
But you have to be able to hire coaches, because your coaches are going to leave. Whether it doesn't matter, you hire a defensive head coach, your offensive coordinator is going to leave. You want your offensive coordinator to leave, because if your offensive coordinator leaves, it means your offense is awesome. But now the Texans are in a position where their offense isn't good. And how does DeMeco Ryans handle that? How does he move forward as the CEO of this franchise and say, I have to choose between a guy that I brought here from San Francisco and what's best for the franchise? Who do you replace him with? Do you replace him with Gerard Johnson? Have you guys developed Gerard Johnson enough to be the next offensive coordinator of this team? Or do you have to look elsewhere? Mm-hmm. So I think the offseason is really where we get a clear picture of it. But it is fair to question it right now, because they're struggling. They've lost games in the last 2 years so far. It's early. I get it. But you have 2 Jets games on your record. You have the Falcons game. You have the Panthers game. You're squeaking out wins left and right. So, yes, it's fair. And it's stupid. And I would tell Sarge this to his face, because I like Sarge. It's stupid.
Sarge?
To compare DeMeco Ryans and the people who are saying fire DeMeco, because no one's saying that, and trying to comp it to the people that want to fire Dusty Baker. I know what you're doing. It's not the same thing. It's totally different. They are not the same conversation. We're not having that DeMeco Ryans conversation. I've seen the response to your post. It is a joke that people are taking that leap when you very specifically said, I normally do this when we play audio clips. I try to take notes. Not saying he sucks, said Paul Gallant in that clip.
Yeah.
They're just taking these giant leaps for no reason.
But some people said I said he's mid. And look, I'm just going to give you my complete background here. Your boy's a perfectionist, probably to his own detriment. Why am I single at 35 years old? Because I still think that I can somehow end up with a supermodel. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I don't know at this point, especially, I'm doing a radio show in an industry that, let's just say, isn't exactly on the thickest of ice. Much thinner ice than DeMeco Ryans is on. Perhaps thicker ice than Bobby Slowick. Whatever the case, bringing it back to me. I'm a perfectionist. I was raised in a household where A- were considered okay. I had a sister who went to effing Harvard. These are standards I had to live up to. And I also grew up watching the greatest football dynasty of all time. Oh, they cheated. Shut up. And I watched them, and then I listened to a radio show that would criticize them every single day. It's always fair to criticize things because everything can always be better. It is always, on top of that, it's fair to, I think, hold people to a standard that is unreasonable, especially in this game that we play, Sports Talk Radio. It's a Wednesday. The Texans are doing the same things over and over again. What's going on with DeMeco Ryans? These are questions that can ask. And I will say, as somebody who once asked this question in 2018, are Houston Texans fans scared to admit that Patrick Mahomes is better than Deshaun Watson, which was met with violence online? Sometimes daddy's right. That's all I'm saying.
But don't people want the higher standard? Don't you want to remove yourself from one of the 4 teams in the NFL right now that hasn't been to a Super Bowl? The only team in the AFC South that hasn't been to an AFC championship game?
I would think so.
Don't you want your teams to be held to this higher standard? Isn't it a good thing? I would beg for the teams that I grew up rooting for to be in the position that Houston Sports is in right now. I would beg for the Bears to be 6-4. I would beg for those teams to be above 500.
By that same logic, Joe, there are some who are like, this is good. Why are we criticizing it? Or why are we asking questions about it? And as a skeptic who some would call cynical, I'm just saying it's always fair to ask questions about that. You're right. There's a lot of people who would love to be in the spot that the Houston Texans are in right now. I mean, they're not sitting at the table of big boy table weekend this weekend in the AFC where you got Chiefs, Bills, and you got Ravens, Steelers. Who would have thought this would be back?
I know.
That one blows my mind. Ravens, Steelers is back again. 2 organizations that have run very well. You're trying to get in the same conversation as, at the very least, 2 of those from a long-term perspective, Baltimore and Pittsburgh, and the Chiefs as well. How do you get there? You got to raise the level. It's very hard to get there. And I think it's totally fair to be skeptical about their ability to get there based off of what has happened thus far. As always, I hope they prove me wrong. I really do. But right now, I feel like DeMeco Ryans has some things that he's got to improve in, much like CJ Stroud has. And it's weird that considering this team is 6-4 and compared to last year is better, more talented, more hype. They're 6-4 just like they were last year. And we're a little underwhelmed with the wins. We're underwhelmed with what's going on in the second half. But we're not going to ask questions about the head coach and the quarterback. We're not going to say, hey, they need to be better. Saying something needs to be better is not saying it sucks. It's mid. It's strange. And again, I'm wired the way that I am, and I'm sure that it is annoying AF for lots of folks out there. But this is how I'm wired.
Yeah, I have no issue with the idea of questioning a coach when things aren't going well. I mean, you heard DeMeco's frustrations after the Jets game, not as much after the Lions game. They were a little more. You could tell they were frustrated, but you kind of heard like the anger, the real frustration for the first time from DeMeco in that one. I'll be honest, I think the answer to this question for me is yes. I do think that he can still move into that upper echelon of coaches in the NFL. Like we've seen what I think you've seen what the 49ers have kind of gone through since he left. They've had to hire a DC who then they had to fire, and their defense has taken a step backwards since DeMeco is no longer the head coach, the defensive coordinator of that football team. Like I do think the way that DeMeco's style that he has can work very well. And I think he can have the Texans as a top tier defense. It's just going to question of, will you bring in the right guys to fix your offense?
He's Joe. I'm Paul. We got a call, 713-780-3776. We've got Gary in the Heights. He wants to talk to DeMeco Ryans and Bobby Slowick. Gare Bear, what's up?
Hey, what's up, guys? And I just want to say about Sarge, the dude is a clown.
No,
Sorry,
I like Sarge. I like Sarge.
I enjoy Sarge.
That's just my opinion. I've been following sports here in the city since Lance and John were on 610 in the late 90s. I have no idea where the guy came from. The hat, the whole Sarge thing, it just gives off clown. That's my personal opinion. But I will say, like, if you're trying to do like the racial thing, like, give me a break, man. Like, there's not a single serious person anywhere calling for DeMeco Ryans to be fired.
Exactly.
Like, I'm sure somebody on the internet said that, but like they're and like the Dusty Baker making that comparison, like that's foolish. And not that it matters, but I'm a black guy and I hate stuff like that. Like, nobody's calling for DeMeco to be fired. But we just lost to the freaking Jets. They're terrible. Like, we just blew up, 16-point lead at home. Like, yes, there's questions. The dude is the head coach. Like, people will question him. That's how it works. So all of that stuff is foolishness. And that's just what I want to say on that. Like, not a fan of Sarge, but overall, that's foolishness. Nobody's asking for DeMeco to be fired.
Yeah, and Sarge is listening. So, what's up, Sarge? Because he responded. This is his defense here. He says it was your station that was pushing the fire Dusty narrative first. So yes, Sarge, said it because how this DeMeco narrative is starting is exactly how the Dusty Baker narrative
I want to bring
started.
Dusty back.
Now look,
Texans offensive coordinator Dusty Baker.
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate thinking that we led the movement.
No, you did actually, Joe. You were on the killer bees, the angry bees.
But as
they wanted Dusty Baker in jail.
Front line with the tiki torch.
As I've responded,
they wanted a strong black man in jail. Yes. Not cool, dude.
As I've responded on Twitter now or X, I also was at the flagship and working on shows that were asking for Dusty Baker to be fired. So as much as I think the killer bees are great and just led the chart, me.
I agree, Sean. That's a great question.
I mean,
who's
Dusty
the common
Baker,
denominator?
There's no one that's hurt me more in my life than Dusty Baker, to be fair.
You brought Kerry Wood and Mark Pryor into this.
I definitely, when he got hired, brought them up. But I think Sarge is good at his job, and I just think it's a leap to think that this conversation is what the Dusty Baker conversation is.
I actually think, and we had this conversation earlier in the week, I think a lot of the pointing at Bobby Slowick has become a lot like, hey, insert Astros manager. We're mad at him because the Astros are not living up to the standards. Saw it this year with Joe Espada, saw it before with Dusty Baker. It was the exact same thing.
Yeah, the Joe Espada stuff came up this year.
Never happened with Hinch.
And there should have been pushback.
Well, after 2019, that's the only time there was pushback with Hinch. Hinch game 4 of the 2015 wild card round. What the F, dude? Pull Will Harris.
Yeah, I do think I always kind of wonder what the conversation's like in 2020 if Hinch is not fired because of the cheating scandal. I'd imagine it'd be way different than what actually occurred because he was gone, and we kind of just had to move on from that because of just what was happening with the Astros at the time. But look, DeMeco, it's fair to question where the Texans are because our expectations were higher, and maybe we as media and fans and people that talk about this team and care about this team deserve the blame for this. I guess that our expectations were too high for a franchise that has achieved far too less with too much talent too often. But the reality is that we all want to see the Texans go to places they've never been. And with the way they're playing this year, one injury should not derail you. We should not be having to reset the season as the Texans are 4-1 with Nico Collins because you lost to the Jets twice, you lost to the Panthers, you lost to the Saints. And the only reason why you made the playoffs last year is because a third-string running back dropped a pass. It's just the reality. Mm-hmm. Expectations should be higher in this city.
And I don't think we all need to get upset about questions being asked about the quarterback and the head coach. These two can handle it. They can handle it. Honestly, they shouldn't be paying attention but they can handle it. We're trying to get past that door that no one has been able to get past in this entire city's history of professional football, unless you count George Blanda and the early AFL days. Like that's how far back we're going. Bum Phillips couldn't do it. Gary Kubiak couldn't do it. Bill O'Brien couldn't do it. It's not the best history here. We're hoping that this is going to be different. And I do feel, and I think we all feel the same way, that even with the struggles right now, the future is the brightest it's ever been with these two. But it is totally fair to ask, how great are both of these guys going to be, given the struggles that we have seen of late?